My suspicions about their calculated betrayal surfaced not with drama, but with a sonogram photo slipping from between mundane bills. My name is Luke Reed, and I'm 35 years old. I spend my days maintaining detailed records in my home office, methodically building the case that will protect everything I've worked for. My wife Janine and my best friend Nicholas planned this masterfully, the pregnancy, the timing, the financial leverage, but they didn't count on my father's legacy. I watched him collapse under the weight of betrayal years ago, letting rage consume him. I chose a different path. Between the labeled folders and documented timeline, I've created an airtight record of their deception. The truth deserves more than angry outbursts. It deserves justice through evidence. But let me start from the beginning. I still remember the exact moment my life split in two. It wasn't during a heated argument or a dramatic confrontation. It happened while sorting through mundane Tuesday mail at my kitchen counter. Between a power bill and a credit card statement, a folded clinic receipt fluttered to the granite surface. A sonogram photo slipped out. My hands went still. The date on the receipt was from 6 weeks ago, but Janine and I hadn't been intimate in over 3 months. The fog of denial tried to creep in. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe I was reading too much into this. But I've built my life on facts and documentation, and the math didn't lie. The pressure in my chest built as I carefully placed the items in a fresh manila folder. The clock on the microwave read 6:47 p.m. I noted the time and date at the top of a legal pad, then began a methodical timeline of the past few months. Each late night at work, every weekend trip with her girlfriends, all those times Nicholas dropped by when I wasn't home. It crystallized into a pattern I couldn't unsee. Remember those moments when your gut knows something long before your mind accepts it? That's where I was, but I refused to let emotion drive this car off the cliff. The memory of my father surfaced as I worked. How his discovery of Mom's affair had destroyed him. I was 12 when I watched rage eat him alive, turning him into a shell of himself. He'd burned every bridge, lost his job, drained his savings on revenge schemes. That wouldn't be my story. Instead of screaming or throwing things, I went to my home office and pulled out a fresh 3-ring binder. Black, 1-inch spine, with clear plastic sleeves for documents. The kind you'd use for a business proposal, not documenting the collapse of your marriage. But order matters when your world turns upside down. I worked through the night, printing bank statements, copying text messages, screenshotting social media posts. Each piece went into a dated sleeve, building a timeline of betrayal in crisp 12-point font. The rising sun found me still at my desk, eyes burning but hands steady. That's when I saw it. The Facebook message thread I'd never meant to find, tucked in an archived folder. Janine had forgotten to log out of her account on our shared laptop. The conversation with Nicholas stretched back months, filled with ovulation tracking dates and clinic appointments. Got another positive this morning, she'd written 3 weeks ago. The attached photo showed 2 clear lines on a pregnancy test. Perfect timing, Nicholas replied. Everything's falling into place. My coffee mug stopped halfway to my lips. This wasn't speculation anymore. This wasn't paranoia or misunderstanding. This was confirmation in black and white, complete with timestamp and delivery receipts. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking steadily against their damning words. The binder sat open beside me, already an inch thick with evidence. Proof that would carry more weight than any angry accusations or emotional outbursts. My father had chosen rage. I chose documentation. I laid out the evidence across our kitchen table the next evening, each page in chronological order. The familiar scent of Janine's morning coffee still lingered in the air. The expensive Brazilian roast I'd surprised her with last Christmas. Amazing how normal everything could smell when nothing was normal anymore. "We need to talk," I said as she walked in, still wearing her blazer from work. Her eyes flickered over the spread of papers, but her expression stayed controlled. "What's all this?" "Documentation." I kept my voice steady, tapping the first page. Starting with the clinic receipt from 6 weeks ago, the one with the sonogram. A slight tightening around her eyes was the only reaction. "You went through my things?" "It fell out of the mail. Just like these messages fell out of your Facebook account when you forgot to log out." I slid the printed screenshots across the table. "Pretty detailed planning between you and Nicholas." ovulation tracking, appointment scheduling, even a photo of the positive test from 3 weeks ago. She sank into the chair across from me, shoulders straight but fingers working at her wedding ring. Luke, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. The dates are very clear. I pointed to the timeline I'd constructed. No intimacy between us for over 3 months. Multiple meetings with Nicholas during your overtime hours. The pregnancy test timestamp matches exactly when I was at that conference in Denver. It's not that simple, she said, voice rising slightly. You're never here. All these late nights at work, your constant focus on savings and investments. When was the last time you actually saw me? I felt the old anger pushing up, but kept it locked down. Don't try to make this about my hours or our marriage being broken. This was calculated. You and Nicholas planned this. I was lonely. Her composure cracked. What did you expect? You built this perfect little financial fortress but forgot about me inside it. Nicholas actually listened. Stop. I placed my palm flat on the table. I'm not here to debate justifications. I'm setting boundaries, effective immediately. No withdrawals from joint accounts, no new debts or loans, and I want a paternity test before we have any discussion about the baby. Her face went cold. You don't trust me? These messages prove I shouldn't. I tapped the screenshots again. You've been systematically lying to me for months. Trust is earned, Janine. You haven't earned it. So that's it? You're just going to control all our money? The manipulation in her tone was familiar now that I knew to listen for it. I'm protecting what we built together while we sort this out legally. If you need basic expenses, we can arrange that through attorneys. She stood abruptly, chair scraping against tile. You're being ridiculous. This isn't the man I married. No, I said quietly. The man you married trusted you completely. That was his mistake. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything shattered. Finally, she turned and walked out, heels clicking sharply down the hall. The sound of our bedroom door slamming echoed through the house. I gathered the documents carefully, returning each to its sleeve in the binder. My hands were steady, but my chest felt hollow, like something vital had been scooped out and replaced with cold certainty. Setting boundaries wasn't enough. I needed to be ready for whatever came next. That evening, I heard Janine's footsteps in the kitchen while I was reviewing documents in my home office. The house felt different now. Every familiar sound carried new weight. Every shadow held potential schemes. I remembered countless evenings like this, sharing space in comfortable silence. Now each moment felt like a chess move. When I finally walked into the kitchen, she was leaning against the counter, a single page laid out before her. Her designer watch caught the overhead light as she smoothed non-existent wrinkles from her silk blouse. Luke, she said, voice carefully modulated to sound reasonable. There's just some hospital paperwork we need to handle. She slid the document toward me with one manicured finger. Standard forms they want filled out early. I stepped closer, deliberately taking my time. The heading read, Voluntary Acknowledgement of Paternity. My jaw tightened, but I kept my expression neutral as I scanned the fine print. Years of reading contracts had taught me to spot the important clauses. This one would legally declare me the father, regardless of biological reality. This isn't hospital paperwork, I said quietly. This is a legal document that would make me financially responsible for the child, regardless of paternity. Her fingers drummed once on the counter before going still. Don't be difficult. It's just a formality. A formality that would override my right to challenge paternity later. I stepped back from the counter, leaving the paper untouched. No. The mask of reasonableness slipped from her face like water off glass. Her eyes went cold, calculating, showing me the real Janine for perhaps the first time in our marriage. She didn't speak again, just gathered the paper and walked away, shoulders rigid with contained fury. I was still standing in the kitchen when my phone vibrated in my pocket. The message was from Nicholas. Be reasonable. 2 words that confirmed everything. They were working together, had probably planned this moment, expected me to cave under pressure and sign away my rights. I could almost hear my father's voice warning me about trust given too freely. I didn't reply to Nicholas. Instead, I pulled up my banking app and changed every password, adding 2-factor authentication. I logged into our investment accounts and credit cards, updating security questions to things only I would know. Each click of increased protection felt like building a wall brick by brick. The binder of evidence went into my fireproof safe, combination reset. I stood in my darkened office afterward, watching my phone screen glow with another incoming message from Nicholas. I let it fade to black without reading it. Silence would be my only response. Let them wonder what I knew, what I was planning. Let them sit with the uncertainty they'd tried to create for me. In the darkness, my phone lit up one final time. I watched it dim and go dark, understanding now that this wasn't just about betrayal. This was calculation. This was strategy. And they'd severely underestimated my capacity for both. The morning sun felt harsh as I pulled into the downtown law office parking lot. My father's old advice echoed in my head. When trouble comes, get smart before you get angry. I'd spent half the night researching attorneys until one name kept surfacing, Emilio Alvarez. The receptionist led me down a hallway lined with dark wood panels to a corner office where Alvarez sat reviewing documents. He looked up, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses with a precise movement that matched his reputation. Mr. Reed. He stood, gesturing to a chair. You mentioned financial urgency in your email. I placed my binder on his desk. My wife is pregnant by another man. I've documented everything, but I'm more concerned about protecting our assets right now. Alvarez nodded, no judgment in his expression. Smart priority. Let's start with account statements. We spent the next hour methodically reviewing our financial landscape. I'd brought everything: bank statements, investment records, property documents. Alvarez made neat notes in blue ink, occasionally asking clarifying questions in that same measured tone. When did you last check your home equity status? He asked, pausing over a particular page. Yesterday. Nothing pending then? His fingers moved across his keyboard. Let me run a verification through my contact at Pioneer Credit Union. He dialed, speaking briefly in quiet Spanish before his expression shifted subtly. I see. Yes, please hold that flag. Thank you, Maria. Remember that feeling when you miss a step in the dark? That's how my stomach dropped when he turned back to me. Your wife submitted a HELOC application yesterday afternoon, trying to borrow against your home equity. My hands clenched. How much? $200,000. He held up a hand before I could speak. The good news is their fraud department flagged it for a 72-hour hold. The bad news is that's our window. After that, if we haven't filed for legal separation, the loan could process. I thought of all those careful mortgage payments, years of building equity. She needs my signature for a HELOC, doesn't she? Normally, yes, but there are ways around it if she's listed on the deed, which she is. Some lenders are less diligent than others. He checked his watch. We have roughly 68 hours to file paperwork that will freeze community spending. The anger pressed hard against my ribs, but I kept my voice steady. What do you need from me? We spent the next 2 hours preparing documents, my hand cramping from signatures. Alvarez worked with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd guided others through similar storms. That night I sat in my home office checking accounts again. The HELOC still showed as pending review in the credit union portal. $200,000, nearly the entire equity we'd built in the house. I could picture Janine and Nicholas planning this, calculating the maximum they could extract. I remembered the day we'd bought this house, how proud I'd felt making that first mortgage payment. Now I was watching the clock, knowing that in less than 3 days all that careful building could vanish into someone else's scheme. My screen showed the time, 9:47 p.m. 64 hours left before that loan could process. 64 hours to stop my life's work from becoming someone else's leverage. Sleep wasn't an option. I spent the pre-dawn hours double-checking every document in my binder, making fresh copies of anything that looked even slightly smudged. The kitchen clock read 6:45 a.m. when I finally allowed myself a cup of coffee. 61 hours left on that fraud hold. The memory of weekend breakfast hit me. French toast and coffee, papers spread across this same table, Janine and I planning our future. The syrup bottle still sat in the cabinet, half empty and forgotten. I pushed the thought away and focused on my coffee, black and bitter. Emilio's office opened at 8. I was there at 7:50, pacing the hallway until his assistant arrived to unlock the door. She gave me a knowing look. Probably not the first anxious client she'd seen waiting at dawn. Come in, Luke. Emilio appeared in his doorway at 8 sharp, already reviewing papers. I've drafted the separation filing and emergency orders. We need to review everything before submission. I settled into what was becoming my usual chair. How detailed do these need to be? Very. Judges appreciate precision. He spread several documents across his desk. We're requesting immediate orders to freeze community spending and prevent new debt. That means documenting every account, every asset. For the next 3 hours, we combed through paperwork line by line. Emilio's methodical approach matched my own need for exactness. Each page required multiple signatures. My hand cramped, but I didn't rush a single one. Too much rode on getting this right. Here's the timeline, Emilio explained, pointing to key sections. Once filed, these orders take effect immediately. The HELOC won't be able to process, and any new spending or debt will violate court orders. My throat felt dry. And if she tries anyway? Then she'll be in contempt. But more importantly, the lender won't touch it once they see these filings. He checked his watch. We should head to the courthouse now. 57 hours left, and I want this processed today. The courthouse steps felt steeper than usual. Lack of sleep dragged at my limbs, but I kept pace with Emilio as we navigated the building's maze. The clerk's office smelled of paper and industrial cleaner, oddly comforting in its bureaucratic certainty. I watched each page disappear into the system as the clerk processed our filing. My signature over and over declaring the end of what I'd thought was an unshakable partnership. The clerk's stamp came down with finality. Filed, with today's date. Congratulations, Emilio said quietly as we left. The orders are in effect. That HELOC won't process now. The weight in my chest shifted slightly. Not lighter exactly, but different. What happens next? She'll be served within 24 hours. After that, we wait for her response. He gripped my shoulder briefly. Get some rest, Luke. You've done what needed doing today. That night, the house felt different. Every creak, every settling sound made me wonder if Janine had returned, if she knew yet what I'd done. I lay in bed staring at shadows on the ceiling, listening to the silence that seemed to pulse with waiting. My phone sat dark and silent on the nightstand. No messages from Nicholas, no calls from Janine. Just the quiet of a house holding its breath, and the knowledge that somewhere across town, a process server was preparing to deliver news that would shatter whatever plans they'd made. The fluorescent lights of the clerk's office had left me drained. After hours of signing and filing, I drove home in a daze, hands tight on the wheel. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across our driveway. My driveway now, I supposed. The house felt hollow, every footstep echoing. I hadn't meant to walk upstairs, my feet just carried me there to the second door on the right. The nursery. The door creaked open, and the scent of fresh paint hit me. That chemical sweetness that had once meant progress, possibility. The walls were a soft green like new leaves in spring. I'd chosen the color myself, spent hours comparing swatches under different lights. It works for any gender, I'd told Janine, proud of my practical thinking. She'd smiled and agreed. Now I wondered if she'd been laughing inside, knowing all along. The paint roller stood propped in the corner, dried paint crusted on its nap. Just 2 weeks ago, I'd been up here on a Saturday morning rolling careful stripes up and down these walls. Music playing from my phone, windows open to the autumn breeze. Planning, dreaming, believing. My chest tightened. The room blurred and I felt the first hot tear break free. I'd wanted to be a father so badly, had imagined reading bedtime stories in that corner where the rocking chair would go, had pictured tiny hands reaching up, first steps on this carpet, crayon marks on these walls that I wouldn't even mind. All lies. Every moment I'd spent in here, planning and painting and dreaming, it had all been built on calculated deception. My legs gave out and I sank to the floor, back against the half-painted wall. The sobs came then, deep and raw, shaking loose everything I'd been holding back. I don't know how long I sat there letting grief pour out. The sun shifted, shadows lengthening across the empty room. Eventually the tears ran dry, leaving me hollow but somehow lighter. Like lancing an infection, painful but necessary for healing. My father's voice echoed in my memory. Son, it's okay to hurt. It's what you do after that matters. He'd been right about that, even if he'd chosen a different path than I would. I pushed myself up, legs stiff from the hard floor. The paint can sat open by the roller, skin forming on its surface. I sealed it carefully, making sure the lid was tight. No point letting good paint go to waste, even if its purpose had changed. The garage was cool and dim when I stored the can on a shelf. Each step back inside felt steadier than the last. In the kitchen, my binder waited on the table where I'd left it this morning. The tabs were neat, organized, financial records, messages, timeline, evidence. I pulled out a chair and opened the binder. The facts were there in black and white, unchanging, undeniable. They couldn't be manipulated by tears or twisted by lies. This was my path forward, not through rage or grief, but through truth. My hands were steady as I began reviewing the documents, one more time. The laptop's glow was the only light in my home office as midnight approached. I'd been methodically working through backups, determined to leave no digital stone unturned. That's when I found them, the archived chats. My jaw clenched as I scrolled through conversation after conversation between Janine and Nicholas. "Trust doesn't vest until June," Janine had written. "We need to lock down the house before then." Nicholas's response made my stomach turn. "Timing is everything. Better start tracking those cycles." The clinical coldness of their planning hit harder than any passionate affair could have. They'd discussed everything: bank accounts, property values, even my likely reactions. It was like reading a heist plot where I was the target. "He'll want to do the right thing," Janine had assured Nicholas. "Just stick to the script about feeling trapped and lonely. He always tries to fix things." My hands trembled slightly as I highlighted that exchange. How many times had I heard those exact words across our kitchen table? Each rehearsed line now felt like a poisoned arrow precisely aimed. "Baby gives us leverage," Nicholas had typed. "Courts love mothers. Once paternity's established, he'll have to play ball." The printer hummed as I created hard copies, each page another nail in the coffin of what I'd once believed about my marriage, about friendship, about trust. Remember those old movies where someone discovers a conspiracy board, red strings connecting photos and documents? That's what my desk looked like as I laid out the timeline. Here was Janine checking ovulation dates. There was Nicholas researching property law. The pieces fit together with terrible precision. "What if he demands a test?" Nicholas had asked. Janine's response: "By then it won't matter. HELOC will be approved. House equity's ours. He can have his proof after we have leverage." My highlighter squeaked across that exchange. The sound felt satisfying, like drawing a blade. Each marked phrase was another piece of armor, protecting my future from their schemes. The last conversation was from just days ago. They'd been congratulating themselves on how smoothly everything was proceeding. "He hasn't got a clue," Nicholas had written. "Too busy being the good husband to see it coming." I sat back, letting out a long breath. The grief that had racked me in the nursery was gone, replaced by something colder, clearer. This wasn't about betrayed love or broken vows anymore. This was about calculated exploitation, documented in their own words. The binder sat open beside my laptop, tabs neat and organized. I added the new pages carefully, each one slipped into a protective sleeve. The evidence was undeniable now, every step of their plan preserved in digital amber. The last page settled into place with a soft rustle. I closed the binder, ran my finger along its spine. Inside was the truth about Janine Reed and Nicholas King, spelled out in their own casual cruelty. 2 weeks after discovering those chats, I sat in Emilio Alvarez's office, watching him arrange our court documents with surgical precision. The morning sun caught his glasses as he lined up 3 identical sets of exhibits. "Everything's duplicated and notarized," he said, tapping the top folder. "Bank affidavit confirms the HELOC attempt. Timelines indexed. Chat transcripts are authenticated with metadata intact." I nodded, remembering the cold efficiency with which we'd assembled our case. The process server had caught Janine at her office, handing her the separation papers and paternity order. Her mask had slipped, just for a moment, according to the server's statement, before she recovered her composure. "Remember," Emilio continued, "Judge Anand values documentation over drama. Let the evidence speak." He squared the corners of our filing, precise as a banker counting bills. "Your wife's attorney will try to paint this as emotional. We stay focused on facts. The familiar weight of my own binder pressed against my palms. I'd spent countless nights organizing these pages, each tab color-coded, each exhibit numbered. You can't argue with timestamps and bank records. "Nicholas confirmed service?" I asked, though I knew the answer. My former best friend had accepted his papers with a pale face and shaking hands, different from all those confident messages about leverage and playing ball. "Both respondents are noticed for 9 a.m. Emilio checked his watch. "We should head over." The walk to the courthouse felt like crossing a threshold. Morning traffic hummed behind us, people rushing to ordinary days at ordinary jobs. I remembered countless mornings walking this same route to grab coffee with Nicholas, back when friendship meant something real. Inside the courthouse lobby, the marble floors amplified every footstep. A few early cases clustered near the security checkpoint. Divorce court never sleeps. I spotted Janine first, perfect in her tailored blazer, phone pressed to her ear. Nicholas stood separately, trying to project casual confidence but fidgeting with his tie. Neither would meet my eyes. Emilio guided us to a bench away from the others. "Review your exhibits," he murmured, though I knew every page by heart. "We're second on the docket." I opened the binder, more for something to do with my hands than from any need to check. There were the chat screenshots, Janine and Nicholas plotting over my future. The bank's fraud alert documentation. The timeline stretching back months before the pregnancy, their plan laid bare in clinical detail. The courtroom doors opened. A bailiff emerged with a clipboard calling the first case. Soon it would be our turn. Soon Judge Anand would see exactly what kind of conspiracy I'd uncovered. My throat felt dry, but my hands were steady on the binder's leather cover. All those nights of careful documentation had led to this moment. No rage, no revenge, just truth, preserved in black and white, waiting for the light of day. The first case filed in, their footsteps fading behind heavy doors. We were next. Emilio placed our exhibits into his briefcase, each motion deliberate and calm. Beside us, Janine's attorney whispered urgently in her ear. Nicholas stared at his phone, his earlier confidence crumbling. The bailiff appeared again. "Reed versus Reed and King," he called, Judge Anand presiding. I stood, gripping the binder that held my future. Time to let the evidence speak. Judge Anand's courtroom commanded silence with its polished wood and morning light filtering through tall windows. She studied our exhibits with methodical focus, her reading glasses catching the glow as she turned each page. "The evidence presented is comprehensive," she said, her tone measured. "Mr. Alvarez, walk me through the timeline." Emilio rose smoothly. "Your Honor, the chat logs demonstrate premeditation. Mrs. Reed and Mr. King discussed timing conception specifically to leverage the trust vesting schedule. The HELOC application attempted 3 days after confirming pregnancy shows clear intent to encumber marital assets. I watched Janine's perfectly maintained composure crack slightly as Emilio highlighted key passages. Her attorney shifted uncomfortably beside her while Nicholas seemed to shrink in his chair. Judge Anand held up the bank's affidavit. The fraud department's hold prevented a significant unauthorized debt. Very fortunate timing. We filed for separation within that window. Emilio confirmed. The lab results are also conclusive regarding paternity. The judge nodded, reviewing the final report. I felt my chest tighten, not from anger anymore, but from the weight lifting. Truth had its own gravity. Given the documented misconduct and the prenuptial agreement's clear language, Judge Anand stated, "I'm granting the petitioner's requests. Mr. Reed shall have exclusive occupancy of the marital residence. The spending injunction remains in place, and with confirmed non-paternity, no spousal support is warranted." She signed the order with careful strokes. I heard Janine's sharp intake of breath, saw Nicholas's hands clench on the table. But their reactions felt distant now, like watching storms through thick glass. "The court thanks counsel for their thorough preparation," Judge Anand concluded. "We're adjourned." The victory settled over me in layers as we left the courthouse. First came the practical wins, my home secured, savings protected, no crushing debt in my future. But deeper ran the personal triumph. I'd faced betrayal with principles intact. I'd chosen documentation over destruction, I'd severed the triangle of manipulation without losing myself to rage. Back home, I stood in my kitchen, morning sun warming the countertop where we'd once shared coffee and trust. I placed the new brass key beside the folded court order, watching light catch the metal's shine. The deadbolt's fresh installation had taken 10 minutes, so quick to replace what had seemed unbreakable. The house felt different now, quieter but not empty. I'd filled it with truth instead of silence, with boundaries instead of blame. My father had taught me the cost of swallowing betrayal until it poisoned everything. I'd chosen a different path, letting evidence speak while anger tried to shout. Looking at that single key, I finally understood. Justice doesn't need violence or vengeance. It needs daylight and documentation, patience and proof. The law listens to what can be verified, not what can be screamed. I traced the judge's signature on the order, feeling the slight indent of her pen. Anger shouts, I said to the quiet kitchen, but proof speaks, and the law listens.